Hello and welcome to the podcast, and if you've been here lots of times before, then welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about a common enemy that all authors have, especially if you are an unread storyteller. It's kind of an insidious enemy, not because of its innate evil or anything like that, but because it's very subtle. We don't realize that it dwells among us. We generally can't see it. It's very hard to pin down or to quantify. But it eats away at our book sales, at our reviews, and even at our potential mega fans. And we don't know that that's happening. And when it does, when we see mediocre sales and reviews, we don't understand why. Well, this common enemy of the unread storyteller, my friends, is called the unfocused story. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what it is, what it means, how to tell if it's after you, and how to fix it, okay? Stay tuned. All right, so here's the thing. Most authors, when they see very mediocre sales and reviews, have a really hard time figuring out why. Now, most people look at the marketing and production aspects of the book first, meaning they look at the title, they look at the cover, they look at the ads, and they try to fix those. First of all, that's a very backward way to do it. You should always look at the writing first. With the right strategy, your writing should be able to sell your books before you do CPC ads. But of course, that's a whole other podcast. So why do people look at the outer stuff first rather than looking at the writing and the storycraft first? Well, honestly, it's because it's the easiest to fix. Yes, it may cost money, but it's easier to pay a cover designer to slap a new cover onto your book for you or noodle around with your blurb for an hour or two than it is to spend months rewriting your entire book, right? So people don't want to hear that the writing is the problem. It takes so much mental energy for the author to think about rewriting their book or going through the entire manuscript to re-edit everything. But very often when we see these mediocre sales, mediocre reviews, once those outer things are tweaked, they fix the cover, they fix the blurb, if the sales still aren't fixed, then at that point the author might ask for help from a professional. And when the professional reads the book, they kind of realize, unfortunately, it's the writing. Now, there are a few different ways that the writing could be flawed, right? It could be sentence structure, things like passive voice, word choice, general grammar, things like that, in which case you need some line editing. It could also be things that are a little bit more surface, like typos, run-on sentences, missing punctuation marks, things like that. And in that case, you just need some very light proofreading or copy editing, right? On the other hand, it could be storycraft. And in terms of the unfocused story, we're going to be particularly paying attention to the storycraft one, because even if you can write an amazing sentence, even if you can put together sentences and paragraphs like J.K. Rowling herself, if your story is well edited and you don't have too many, if any, typos or grammatical errors, even if all of those things are fixed, if your story is unfocused, you're still going to lose your reader. It's an unfortunate but honest truth, real talk here, okay? So the next question is, what is an unfocused story? Well, the short and easy answer is that it's a story without a plan, specifically without an end point to aim at. So I want you to think of building a story like building a house. There are several parts of it that shape what the story, or in this case, what the house, will look like. First of all, there's the foundation upon which the house is built. Then there's the framework, which gives the house its shape. There are a lot of invisible elements that one can't see while walking through the finished product of the house, or by walking outside it, right? These things are like wiring, plumbing, insulation. You don't see them in the finished product, but they are there. They're just kind of the invisible elements that make the house very functional. And then, of course, there are the visible surface elements that everyone enjoys about the finished product. These are going to be things like the carpeting, the paint on the walls, the floors, the decorations. On the outside, it would be whatever materials you're using to build the outside of the house, stucco, siding, what have you. But now I want you to imagine trying to build a house, or any building for that matter, without any kind of plan, blueprint, or idea what it's going to look like when it's finished. Now, first of all, let's just kind of get the elephant out of the room and say that there are definitely some architects and builders who could probably do this, right? They have enough experience and knowledge to know what needs to go into a house, and they could keep a lot of it in their heads. But again, that's due to them already having knowledge and experience and already knowing how to build a house. And that's not really what I'm talking about here, okay? Once we gain knowledge and experience of the thing, we do it much more easily and naturally. But I'm talking about someone like you or me that really doesn't know much about how to construct a house, about what goes into it, about the sequence and the materials and what actually needs to be done, okay? If we just start building a house willy-nilly and putting things in random places because we think it looks good there, we're not going to end up with a very desirable finished product, are we? We'll like put a room here and then put another room over there, and maybe the kitchen will be here. Oh, and we need a bathroom. Don't forget the bathroom. Okay, where are we going to put that? And you're just going to end up with a really lumpy and not very sleek design, okay? Not to mention, if you don't build on a really sturdy foundation using the right elements, the right materials, all of that, you're going to end up with a house that's somewhere between shaky and downright unsafe. And what about those invisible elements? I mean, we all know that they're part of a house, but if we don't plan for them, we're going to forget at least a few of them, right? And you're going to end up with what looks like some semblance of a nice house, but it's not going to be terribly functional without plumbing or wiring or correct insulation, right? Okay, guys, the same thing goes of your story. Without a concrete plan, without knowing what your story needs before you start, without knowing the sequence, how much and when to implement everything, you're going to end up with a lumpy, lopsided, shaky, and only semi-functional story. Now, maybe we should go ahead and define that. What do I mean by a semi-functional story? Well, the elements in your story should function in a very specific way to create catharsis for the reader and help them connect with your story and characters. And if you have a reader saying, either out loud or in a review, it was okay, or it was pretty good, maybe I couldn't get into it, or this and this and this was good, but I still couldn't finish it, or it was kind of boring, anything like that. The reason that happens is because the elements of your story aren't functioning in the way they should in order to help the reader connect with it, okay? If you plan out your story and have all of the elements you need before you start writing, you won't have to ask yourself, how can I help my reader connect with my story more deeply? Because it will happen automatically if you've already included all the right things. And if you have that plan in place, and if you specifically know the ending that you're writing toward, okay? So it's kind of like after building the house that we talked about, the builder doesn't have to say, what else can I do to make this house more functional for the occupants? He or she doesn't need to ask that because they already put all of the invisible elements into place as they were building the house. And those things are already present and already functional. So the builder doesn't have to do anything extra. It was already all built into the plan. And when it's a finished product, it's perfectly functional as is, assuming that they didn't screw anything up, right? But you get the idea for the analogy. Now, if you don't put everything into place as you go, you're going to end up with an unfocused story. Now, a quick word on pantsing or discovery writing. I'm sure this sounds like I am 100% pro-outlining and pro-plotting and that a discovery writer couldn't do this because I'm talking about planning in advance. But that's actually not the case, okay? I know discovery writers write the first draft of their story in order to discover what it is. I personally have never been a huge fan of that because it takes so much more time, and I feel like it's a waste of words, but I know that not everybody feels that way. So again, just my opinion. But I also believe that you can actually learn to do that same process a lot more efficiently, and so that it doesn't take as much time and quite as much brain power. But again, that's kind of a different lesson. But if you're a discovery writer and your joy is in writing that way, then more power to you. You go right ahead and do whatever lights you up. But just know that once you discover what your story is, the only way to keep it from being unfocused is to scrap everything. And I do mean absolutely everything, and start over with the ending in mind. Because when you're pantsing a story or discovery writing, you're kind of moving from one thing to another. You're going over here, you're going over there in order to discover what the story is, who the characters are. And again, that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But then you need to stop, scrap it all, and write with the ending in mind so that everything is very, very focused toward that ending. And most pantsers and discovery writers don't do this. It takes too much time, it takes too much effort, too much brain power, and they just sort of instead try to edit the story into a focused manuscript. And that, my friends, does not ever work, okay? You're going to end up with an at least somewhat unfocused story if you do that. So in short, if you must pants, then please pants to your heart's content, but just be willing to do the work afterward to make sure that you have a focused story. If you don't, then you're going to end up with a focused story and all the consequences of an unfocused story, which is great segue into the next question. What are the consequences of an unfocused story? Well, I've already pretty much told you, okay? It's, in a word, mediocrity. It's a mediocre story, a mediocre arc, mediocre emotions that are evoked. It's mediocre sales, mediocre reviews, and overall mediocre royalties. And guys, don't feel bad about this. I mean, let's be real. We all start by writing at least somewhat unfocused stories. It's just a matter of lacking experience or knowledge, sometimes maturity. But eventually, if we want to be successful in any area of life we're pursuing, in this case, writing fiction, we have to level up. So if your stories are unfocused, don't beat yourself up about it. We all start out that way. I did. You did. Stephen King probably did, right? I mean, my first stories were definitely not uber focused. This is stuff that I've learned over years, not only by studying writing and storycraft, but by pursuing my other interests, which include spirituality and psychology, and then I take that and apply it to the process of storytelling. And I've found that you can create so much a deeper and more connecting story by doing that. And honestly, that's kind of my superpower. I'm really good at figuring out why something in a story works, like logically going, okay, that was awesome. That made me feel something. How did they do that? And then I can figure it out. I approach it from what I know of subconscious spiritual principles and of psychology and the principles of psychology. And then I'm really good at laying it out in a step-by-step process so that other people can also put that framework into their stories, thereby connecting with the readers much more deeply. And the byproduct of that is simply a more commercially successful book, because the more a reader feels, the more they're going to gush about the story, the more they're going to buy all of your books because they know you know how to tell a story. You know how to make them feel something. So of course that's going to lend itself to better reviews and more downloads and more royalties and all the things that we want, okay? But again, my earliest stories were not terribly focused either, okay? And look, guys, you got to understand that this cycle is true not just of fiction writing and not even just of the arts, okay? It's true of every single industry. Business, sports, athletics of any kind, health and wellness, relationships even. We always start just by kind of putting things together piecemeal, doing the best we can based on our own understanding, and watching what other people do, okay? But think about this in like other areas of your life where you've naturally done this when you were getting started. Were your efforts always super sustainable? Probably not, okay? Because again, this is a universal principle across any part of your life you can think of. Let's look at an example like relationships. Notice how for most people, not all, there are some exceptions, but for most people, the first teenage romantic relationships we have are generally not the ones we're in for the rest of our lives. Why is that? Because we're inexperienced. We, don't entirely know what we're doing. We are pretty immature, and we don't know how to sustain a deep, abiding relationship. But as we grow up, as we get more experience, as we learn from our mistakes and from others, eventually, hopefully, we do, right? And the same can be said of anything, any part of our life. People always start at absolute zero when it comes to playing sports. I mean, you guys, do you know that Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team and he cried on the way home to his mom and dad because he'd been cut? I mean, everybody starts at zero, and it's not really about innate talent. I have no doubt that you have some of that, especially if you're an avid reader, which most of us are, but it's not really about the talent. Okay, it's about what you're willing to learn, if you're willing to grow and approach it from a higher level than the masses do, okay? Those who want to be successful in a professional way, again, if we're talking about sports, we're not talking about people who just want to play in, a rec league or even in junior high or high school, people who want to become professional players and actually make money at this instead of just dabbling. What do? They get a coach, okay? They get a business manager. The coach will correct their form and help them level up as opposed to what the masses are doing. Other people like business managers and everybody else that they need to help them will help them level up above what, the basic, more well-known level of skill is, okay? The same is going to be true of your writing. There are plenty of authors who are writing and uploading stories to Amazon and the other retailers who are writing, quote unquote, pretty good stories, okay? But I promise you, those pretty good stories are only seeing pretty good royalties, okay? It's not probably something they can live off of. And if you want to be a career author and truly make good money on your stories, the time has come, my dear unread storyteller, that you need to level up, okay? So if you and your characters are the victims of the unfocused story, okay? And what does this look like? If you're having trouble finishing your story or filling out the events of your story, if nothing you come up with feels epic enough or aligned enough, and you feel like there's more or something better you could put into your story, but you just can't figure out what that is, okay? If you're dealing with block, if you're dealing with indecision, if you're getting mediocre receptions to your chapters, maybe you're workshopping them or showing them to people and it's kind of, or if you've done some publishing already, but you're getting mediocre sales, mediocre reviews, mediocre revenue, these are all symptoms of the unfocused story, okay? And if you're experiencing these things and are frustrated and feeling like you're pulling out your hair because you want to be a successful author and you just feel like you keep hitting walls, maybe it's time to level up and learn how to write a six-figure story. Now, all of this is to say that my new program, which, as you might have maybe guessed, is called Six-Figure Stories, is ready to start having some students go through it, okay? I'm still in the process of creating it, especially the second half, and it still probably needs some tweaking, but I've decided to open it up and let a small handful of students go through it for a beta phase, okay? Because of that, I'm going to keep the price really low, and the only thing I ask in return is that the students fill out a short questionnaire at the end of each module so I can get some feedback and figure out where there might be any holes or confusions that I need to iron out before I open it up to the masses. So if you're interested in up-leveling your storycraft and learning the 3 skills I talked about in last week's episode 225, which includes tapping into your subconscious well of creativity, creating a naturally cathartic story to connect with your readers, and building markability into your story as you write, you may be a good candidate for the beta. So if that's you, click the link in the in the show notes, and it's going to take you to basically an application that is a Google form, okay? And you can read all of the details there. It'll have all of the information. And if you're interested, then go ahead and fill it out and send it in. And like I said, I'm going to open this to a very small number of students. And once we start accepting applications, I will send links for where to go and give you the next steps and everything if you do get accepted. And then once I hit the numbers that I'm looking for, then I will close it down for the time being until I'm ready to actually launch it to the masses. Which will probably happen in the next few months, and it will have a higher price point at that point because it will be going out. It'll be finished. It'll be in its, completely polished form, and it will be going out to everybody. So yeah, if that's you and you're at all interested, click the link in the show notes and head over to the Google form, and like I said, it will have all of the information there for you. In the meantime, everyone else, have a wonderful week writing. Do your best to get out there and write a focused story. Remember, put most simply, that just means having a plan, having something, specifically an ending, toward which all the elements of your story are pointed and headed. A focal point around which your story is built, rather than just having it meander all over the place, okay? If you do even that one simple thing when writing your story, I promise it's going to be infinitely stronger, more cohesive, and just all around better and more focused, okay? And if you want more help with this, I would love to teach you how to do it in great detail and create storytelling masterpieces inside of my program, Six-Figure Stories. And again, you can click the link if you're interested in that. Happy writing, my friends. Have a great week. Happy storytelling, and happy changing the world for the better through your beautiful stories. I'll see you next time.